I always believed that love, like the roots of an old oak tree, would hold a family together no matter how wild the storm. But I learned the hard way. Sometimes your own family can be the ones who leave you out in the rain, shivering with nothing but your regrets. That's exactly where my story begins. Not with shouting or slammed doors, but with the quiet, bone-deep realization that my sacrifices had become invisible. My name is Martha Hayes, and I gave my family everything. My youth, my savings, and every ounce of my strength. Yet when I needed them, they left me with nothing but debt and a heart bruised by betrayal. I didn't let anger lead me, though. Instead, I began to see the truth and plot my own way out. Hello, I'm Martha, and this is my story of how I reclaimed my dignity from the very people who should have cherished it most. Where are you watching from? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories like mine. Now, let me take you inside the heart of my family, where secrets festered and power waited to be claimed. The alarm clock screamed at 5:30 a.m., just like it had every morning for the past 15 years. I rolled out of bed, my joints protesting with familiar aches, and padded to the kitchen in my worn slippers. "Morning, Mom," David mumbled from the couch, not bothering to look up from his phone. Empty beer bottles cluttered the coffee table around him. "Good morning, sweetheart. Did you sleep out here again?" "Karen's mad about something. Figured I'd give her space." I bit back my response. At 38, my eldest son should have been handling his own marital problems, not camping out in my living room like a teenager. Instead, I started the coffee maker and began preparing breakfast for whoever might wander down. "You working today?" I asked, wiping down the counter. "Might be. Depends on if Thompson calls me back about that construction job." The same construction job he'd been waiting to hear back about for 3 weeks. I'd stopped asking direct questions about his employment status months ago. The answers were always vague, always promising, always disappointing. Lucas stumbled into the kitchen, hair disheveled, wearing yesterday's clothes. "Coffee ready?" "Almost. Good morning to you, too." He grunted and slumped into a chair. My younger son had inherited his father's height, but none of his work ethic. At 34, he was still finding himself, which apparently meant sleeping until noon and borrowing money for gas. "I need $40, he announced without preamble. "What for?" "Job interview. Need to look professional." My heart did that familiar skip of hope. "Really? What kind of job?" "Sales position. Downtown. Guy said I'd be perfect for it." I reached for my purse, already knowing I shouldn't. My checking account was stretched thin after covering David's car payment and Karen's medical bills. But what if this was finally Lucas's break? "I'll pay you back Friday," he said, pocketing the 220s without meeting my eyes. "Of course you will." Karen appeared in the doorway, her blonde hair perfectly styled despite the early hour. She surveyed the kitchen with the critical eye of someone who'd never cleaned it herself. "Martha, we need to talk about the electric bill. It's getting ridiculous." "I know it's high. The air conditioner's been running more because of the heat. Maybe if certain people weren't home all day, we wouldn't have this problem." Her gaze flicked meaningfully toward Lucas. "I'm not home all day," Lucas protested. "I'm out looking for work." "Right. That's why your bed looks like it hasn't been slept in." "That's because I was out late networking." I poured coffee into 4 mugs, adding cream to Karen's and sugar to Lucas's, the way they liked it. Small gestures that went unnoticed, like most of what I did. "Anyway," Karen continued, "we think you should ask your landlord about splitting the utilities differently. This is a big house, and we're all paying equally when clearly some people use more than others. The irony wasn't lost on me. My name was on the lease. I'd been paying the bulk of the bill since my husband died 3 years ago. But somehow, in Karen's twisted logic, I was the problem. "I'll look into it," I said quietly. "Good. Oh, and David and I won't be here for dinner tonight. We're meeting with a financial advisor." "That's wonderful. I'm glad you're—" "It's about our future. Planning ahead, you know? Making smart decisions." She paused, stirring her coffee with deliberate slowness. "Some of us can't just work retail forever." The words hit their mark. I'd been managing the jewelry counter at Brennan's department store for 12 years, working my way up from seasonal help to assistant manager. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work that paid our bills when no one else's contributions did. "Mom's retail job pays for your food," Lucas said, surprising me with his defense. "I'm just saying we all need to think bigger. David's got plans. Real plans." David looked up from his phone for the first time. "We're exploring investment opportunities, building wealth instead of just surviving paycheck to paycheck." "With what money?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. "We're working on that. There are ways to leverage assets, create opportunities. You wouldn't understand." The dismissal stung, but I kept my expression neutral. "I'd like to understand. Maybe you could explain it to me." Karen laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Martha, no offense, but this is pretty advanced stuff. Numbers, projections, risk assessment. It's not really your thing." "Not my thing." I'd been managing household finances since I was 18 years old. I'd balanced budgets through my husband's illness, his unemployment, his death. I'd stretched grocery money to cover emergencies and made Christmas happen with $50 and creativity. But apparently, none of that qualified me to understand advanced stuff. "I should get ready for work," I said, rinsing my untouched coffee down the sink. Emma bounced into the kitchen, her backpack slung over one shoulder. At 19, my granddaughter was the only one who still hugged me good morning. "Morning, Grandma. You look tired." "Just another early morning, sweetheart." "Dad, can I borrow 20 for lunch money?" Emma asked, turning to David. "Ask your grandmother. She's the one with the job." Emma's face flushed red. "I wasn't asking Grandma. I was asking you." "And I'm telling you to ask the person who actually has money." I reached for my purse again, but Emma shook her head. "Never mind. I'll pack something." The kitchen fell silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the tick of the wall clock. Emma grabbed an apple from the fruit bowl and headed for the door. "Have a good day at school," I called after her. "You too, Grandma. I love you. Love you too, sweetheart." After Emma left, the weight of the morning settled on my shoulders like a familiar coat. I climbed the stairs to my bedroom, the same room I'd shared with my husband for 25 years, and sat on the edge of the bed. In the mirror across the room, I saw a woman I barely recognized. When had my hair become so gray? When had those lines around my eyes deepened into permanent creases? I looked like someone's grandmother, someone's mother, someone's employee. But when had I stopped looking like Martha? My phone buzzed, a text from my supervisor. "Can you work a double today? Sarah called in sick." I stared at the message. A double shift meant 16 hours on my feet, dealing with difficult customers and pushy salespeople. It meant missing dinner with the family. Not that anyone would notice. It also meant overtime pay, which we desperately needed. "Of course," I typed back. "See you at 8. I changed into my work clothes, the same navy blazer and sensible shoes I wore 5 days a week. In the bathroom, I applied concealer under my eyes and lipstick that had seen better days. Professional, but not flashy. Competent, but not threatening. Downstairs, David was alone in the kitchen, still scrolling through his phone. "I'm working a double today," I told him. "There's leftovers in the fridge if anyone gets hungry." "David, can I ask you something?" He looked up, eyebrows raised. "The financial advisor Karen mentioned. Are you planning to make changes to our living situation?" "Why would you ask that?" "I just want to understand what's happening. This is my home too." He set down his phone, giving me his full attention for the first time in weeks. "Mom, you don't need to worry about anything. We're family. We take care of each other." The words should have been comforting, but something in his tone made my stomach tighten. "Of course we do. That's all I've ever wanted." "Good. Then trust us to handle the big picture stuff, okay? You've got enough to worry about with work and keeping this place running." I nodded, but doubt gnawed at me as I grabbed my car keys. "Trust us," he'd said. But trust was supposed to flow both ways, wasn't it? The drive to work gave me 20 minutes to think, which lately felt more like a punishment than a gift. I kept replaying conversations, searching for hidden meanings, wondering when I'd become so paranoid about my own family's intentions. Maybe Karen was right. Maybe I didn't understand advanced financial planning. Maybe I was just tired and seeing problems where none existed. But as I pulled into Brennan's parking lot, one thought kept circling back. If we were a family who took care of each other, why did I feel so alone? 3 weeks passed like a slow leak in a tire. Gradually, then all at once, things began to deflate. The first crack appeared on a Tuesday morning when I couldn't find my bank statements. "Lucas, have you seen the mail from First National?" I called from the kitchen, rifling through the usual pile of bills and advertisements. "Nope," came his voice from the living room, where he'd been job hunting on his laptop for the past 2 hours. I checked my dresser drawer, my desk, even the junk drawer where important things sometimes ended up. Nothing. It wasn't like me to misplace financial documents. "David, did you move anything from the counter yesterday?" "Why would I touch your mail?" His response came too quickly, too defensively. I paused in my search, studying his face. He was looking at his phone again, but his thumb wasn't scrolling. The screen hadn't changed in minutes. "Just wondering. I always put the bank statements in the same place." "Maybe you forgot this month. Maybe. Or maybe someone else had gotten to the mail first." The thought felt petty and suspicious, but it lodged in my mind like a splinter. That evening, I called the bank to request copies of my statements. The automated system asked for my account number, then my PIN. After a few minutes of hold music, a human voice came on the line. "Mrs. Hayes? I show your account was accessed yesterday through our online portal. Did you need help with something specific?" "Accessed? I don't use online banking." "Your account shows activity yesterday at 2:47 p.m. Someone logged in with your credentials to view statements and account history." My blood went cold. That's impossible. I don't have online banking set up. "Let me check. I see the account was enrolled in online services 3 weeks ago. Would you like me to walk you through the security questions that were used to verify your identity?" "Yes, please." The questions were basic. Mother's maiden name, first pets, name, elementary school. Information that anyone in my family would know. Information I'd shared freely over the years, never thinking it might be used against me. "I need to speak to someone about unauthorized access to my account." Of course. I'm transferring you to our fraud department now. 20 minutes later, I'd learned that someone had been monitoring my account for weeks, checking my balance, reviewing my spending patterns, downloading statements. The bank could see the IP address, but it would take a formal investigation to trace it back to a specific device. I hung up feeling sick. One of my family members, people I trusted, people I loved, was spying on me, but why? The answer came 2 days later, delivered with Karen's usual charm over morning coffee. Martha, we need to have a serious conversation about household expenses. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, a manila folder spread before her, like evidence in a trial. David flanked her right side, his expression carefully neutral. I've been reviewing the bills, and frankly, I'm concerned about how money is being managed around here. My coffee cup rattled against the saucer as I set it down. What do you mean? Well, for instance, you spent $87 at the grocery store last week. For what? There's barely any food in the refrigerator. That's because everyone ate it. $87, Martha. That's more than some families spend in a month. It's groceries for 5 adults, and Emma when she's here, plus household, supplies, cleaning products. See, this is exactly what I'm talking about. Karen's voice took on that patronizing tone she used when explaining things to Emma. You're not thinking strategically about purchases, shopping without a plan, buying name brands when generics work just as well. David cleared his throat. Mom, we're not trying to criticize you. We're trying to help. Help with what? Financial efficiency. We've been doing some number crunching, and there's a lot of waste in how this household operates. Karen flipped through papers in her folder. Your electric bill averaged $204 last month. That's excessive for a house this size. It's summer. The air conditioning runs constantly because no one manages the thermostat. Lucas keeps his room like an icebox. You leave lights on all over the house, and frankly, some of us have gotten lazy about energy conservation. The irony was breathtaking. Karen, who spent her days in my air-conditioned living room, watching television and online shopping, was lecturing me about energy waste. I'll be more careful, I said quietly. Good. Now, about the utilities arrangement. David and I think it's time to restructure how bills are handled. What kind of restructuring? David leaned forward, his business voice emerging. We want to set up a household account. Everyone contributes a fair share based on their income and usage patterns. More transparent, more equitable. Everyone? Well, obviously the contributing members of the household, people who are actually generating income. Lucas wandered into the kitchen at that moment, his timing perfect for maximum awkwardness. Morning family meeting? He asked, heading straight for the coffee pot. We're discussing financial responsibility, Karen said, her voice dripping with disapproval. Cool. When do I get my allowance? The joke fell flat. Karen's expression could have curdled milk. Actually, Lucas, this involves you too. It's time everyone in this house started pulling their weight. I'm looking for work. For 8 months. Maybe it's time to consider that the problem isn't the job market. Karen. David's voice held a warning, but not the kind that protected Lucas. It was the warning of someone who didn't want the conversation to go off script. What? We're all thinking it. Some people in this family have gotten comfortable living off others' hard work. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping against the linoleum. I need to get ready for work. Martha, wait. We're not finished. I am. In my bedroom, I sat on the bed and tried to process what had just happened. Karen had referred to my income as if it belonged to the household, but Lucas's unemployment as a personal failing. David had talked about transparency while secretly accessing my bank account. The double standard was so blatant it took my breath away. My phone rang. Emma's name flashed on the screen. "Hi, sweetheart." "Grandma, are you okay? You sound upset." "Just tired. How are you?" "Actually, I wanted to ask you something. Dad said you guys are having money problems." My grip tightened on the phone. "What exactly did he say?" "He said you were struggling to pay bills and might need to make some changes around the house. He asked if I could help out more, maybe get a part-time job to contribute." The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. David was using Emma, manipulating her natural desire to help family, to support whatever narrative he was building. "Emma, sweetheart, we're fine. You focus on school. But if you need help, I need you to be 19 and worry about your own future. That's the best help you can give me." "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." After I hung up, I sat in the silence of my bedroom and faced an uncomfortable truth. My family was lying to me. More than that, they were coordinating their lies, building a case I didn't understand for a conclusion I hadn't seen coming. The bank statements, the household meeting, the conversation with Emma. None of it was coincidence. It was strategy. That evening, I made an excuse about working late and drove to the library instead. In the quiet of the computer section, I logged into my online banking account, the one I'd supposedly never set up. Sure enough, there it was. Weeks of activity I hadn't authorized. Someone had been studying my finances with the dedication of an accountant. I changed my passwords, set up security alerts, and requested new account numbers. Then I sat back and considered my options. I could confront them directly, but they'd already proven they were comfortable lying to my face. I could pretend I didn't know what was happening, but that felt like walking blindfolded toward a cliff. Or I could do what they'd been doing to me. Watch, listen, and learn. The drive home felt different. Instead of dreading another evening of subtle criticism and dismissive comments, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: curiosity. What exactly were David and Karen planning? How deep did their deception go? And most importantly, what did they think they knew about my finances that I didn't? As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed David's car wasn't there. Neither was Karen's SUV. But their absence didn't feel like relief. It felt like opportunity. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of Lucas's television. I climbed the stairs to David and Karen's room, my heart pounding with the unfamiliar thrill of trespassing. Their dresser top was cluttered with the usual detritus of daily life: loose change, receipts, Karen's jewelry. But tucked beneath a stack of magazines, I found what I was looking for: a notebook filled with Karen's careful handwriting. Martha's monthly income, $2,047. Average monthly expenses, $3,200. Shortfall, $353. Assets, house equity. Savings account, 401k from previous job. Below that, a list of questions. How much savings does she have? What's the house worth? Can we convince her to refinance? What happens if she can't work? My hands shook as I photographed each page with my phone. This wasn't just financial curiosity. This was a business plan. And I was apparently the business. I was so focused on the notebook that I almost missed the footsteps on the stairs. I shoved everything back in place and slipped out of the room, just as Lucas appeared at the top of the landing. "Grandma, what are you doing up here?" "Looking for my reading glasses. Thought I might have left them in the bathroom." He nodded. disinterested, and disappeared into his room. But as I headed back downstairs, I caught him watching me through his cracked door. How long had they been planning this? How long had I been walking around my own house, blind to the fact that I'd become a problem to be solved, rather than a person to be loved? That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation, every dismissive comment, every small betrayal. The pattern was clear now that I knew to look for it. They weren't just taking advantage of my generosity. They were actively undermining my confidence, making me doubt my own judgment, isolating me from information about my own life. The cruelest part was how patient they'd been, how gentle this manipulation had felt at first, like concerned family members helping a confused elderly woman manage her affairs. Except I wasn't confused. I wasn't elderly. And I definitely wasn't helpless. As the clock struck midnight, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to find out exactly what my loving family had planned for me, and then I was going to plan something for them. The gathering was supposed to be a celebration, Emma's 19th birthday, family coming together around my dining room table, the kind of evening that used to fill my heart with warmth. Instead, it became the night I learned just how little my family thought of me. "Grandma, you outdid yourself with the decorations," Emma said, admiring the streamers and balloons I'd hung that morning. "It's nothing fancy, sweetheart. Just wanted to make it special for you. It's perfect." David's brother Michael had driven in from 2 towns over with his wife Janet and their twin boys. My sister Rose brought her famous potato salad and a bottle of wine. Even Lucas had made an effort, showering and wearing a clean shirt for the occasion. We'd made it through dinner without incident. Emma had opened her presents, a sweater from Rose, a gift card from Michael and Janet, and the small gold necklace I'd saved for 3 months to afford. The cake was decorated with buttercream roses, her favorite since childhood. It was during dessert that everything went sideways. "This is delicious, Martha," Janet said, taking another bite of cake. "Did you make it from scratch?" "Of course, she did," Karen interjected before I could answer. "Martha does everything from scratch. She's very traditional that way." Something in her tone made Michael look up from his plate. "Traditional? Well, you know, old-fashioned methods, old-fashioned thinking. It's sweet, really, but not always practical in today's world." Rose frowned. "What do you mean by that?" David cleared his throat, the sound I'd learned to recognize, as his signal for taking control of a conversation. "We've been trying to help Mom modernize some of her approaches. Budgeting, household management, that sort of thing." "Help her how?" Michael asked. "Just bringing some efficiency to how things are done around here. Mom's got a good heart, but she's not exactly a numbers person." I set down my fork, feeling heat rise in my cheeks. "I've been managing numbers since before you were born, David." "I know, Mom. That's not what I meant." "Then what did you mean?" Karen jumped in with a laugh that sounded like fingernails on a chalkboard. "Oh, Martha, don't be so sensitive. David's just saying that financial planning has gotten more complicated. There are investment strategies, tax implications, economic factors that weren't as important when you were younger." "When I was younger?" "You know what I mean. Things were simpler then. You could just put money in a savings account and not worry about inflation or market volatility." Rose's voice was dangerously quiet. "Karen, how old do you think Martha is?" "I just meant because she's 62, not 92, and she's been supporting this entire household for the past 3 years." "That's exactly the problem," David said, his voice taking on that patronizing tone that made my skin crawl. Mom's been carrying too much of the financial burden. It's not sustainable. Michael leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. What kind of burden? Everything. Rent, utilities, groceries, car payments. Mom's been covering it all because she feels guilty about us living here. Guilty? I couldn't keep the shock out of my voice. David, you're here because you lost your apartment. Lucas is here because he couldn't make rent. I'm not paying bills out of guilt. I'm paying them because they need to get paid. See, this is what I'm talking about, Karen said, gesturing toward me like I was a museum exhibit. Martha thinks she has to do everything herself. She won't let us help. How exactly have you tried to help? We've offered to take over the household finances, set up a proper budget, consolidate expenses, make everything more efficient. But Martha won't hand over control. Janet looked confused. Hand over control of what? The bills, the bank accounts, the financial decisions. We've explained that it would be better for everyone if the household had unified financial management. Better for everyone. Rose's voice was getting sharper. Or better for you. That's not fair, Rose, David said. We're trying to help Mom plan for her future. What happens when she can't work anymore? What happens if she gets sick? I'm sitting right here, I said quietly. You can talk to me instead of about me. Mom, we are talking to you. We've been trying to have this conversation for months, but you shut down every time we bring up long-term planning. Lucas, who'd been silent through the entire exchange, suddenly spoke up. Maybe because your long-term planning sounds a lot like taking over her life. Everyone turned to stare at him. He shrugged, uncomfortable with the attention but committed to his point. I mean, come on. You want her to sign over her bank accounts, let you manage her bills, make her financial decisions for her. How is that helping her? Because she's not capable of making those decisions herself, Karen snapped, her mask finally slipping completely. Look at this place. Look at her bank account. Look at how she spends money. $87 on groceries for 1 week. $40 here. $20 there. Never tracking anything. Never planning ahead. The table went dead silent. Emma's eyes were wide with shock. Michael and Janet exchanged glances. Rose's hand was clenched around her wine glass. I'm not capable? I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. That's not what Karen meant, David said quickly. But the damage was done. No, that's exactly what she meant. She thinks I'm incompetent. Martha, you're putting words in my mouth. Am I? Because what I heard was you saying I'm too stupid to manage my own money, too stupid to make my own decisions, too stupid to plan my own future. You're being dramatic. Am I? Then explain to me, Karen. Since I'm apparently too incompetent to understand, explain to me how signing over my bank accounts to my unemployed son is good financial planning. David's face flushed red. I'm not unemployed. I'm between jobs. For 8 months. The economy is tough right now. Not too tough for you to have opinions about my financial management. Michael cleared his throat. Maybe we should... No, I said, standing up from my chair. Let's finish this conversation. Let's talk about financial capability. David, what's your credit score? That's not relevant. Mine's 847. What's yours? Mom, this isn't a competition. You're right. It's not. Because there's no competition. I've never missed a payment on anything. I've never defaulted on a loan. I've never declared bankruptcy or had my car repossessed or been evicted from an apartment. Karen's face was now matching her husband's. That's not fair. David's been through some rough patches, and I helped him through every single one. Just like I helped Lucas when he couldn't make rent. Just like I helped you when you needed surgery and couldn't work. But somehow, I'm the one who's financially incompetent. Emma reached for my hand. Grandma. It's okay, sweetheart. Your parents are just concerned about my future. They think I need their help managing my life. We do want to help, David said, his voice softer now. But you have to admit, Mom, you're not getting any younger. Things are going to get harder. Things are hard now. Do you know why? Because I'm supporting 5 adults on a retail salary. Because I'm paying car insurance for vehicles I don't drive, cell phone bills for phones I don't use, and credit card payments for debt I didn't incur. We never asked you to. You never asked because you didn't have to. Because I did it, automatically. Because I'm your mother, and I love you. The room was so quiet I could hear the kitchen clock ticking. Emma's eyes were bright with unshed tears. Rose looked like she wanted to throttle someone. But here's what I've learned, I continued, my voice steady despite the emotions churning in my chest. Love isn't supposed to be one-directional. Respect isn't supposed to be conditional. And family isn't supposed to meet in secret to discuss how incompetent you are. David's eyes widened. Mom, what are you talking about? I'm talking about your notebook, Karen. The one where you've calculated my income, my expenses, and my shortfalls. The one where you've estimated the value of my assets and planned how to get access to them. Karen's face went white. I don't know what you think you saw. I saw exactly what you intended me to never see. I saw a business plan that treats me like a problem to be solved rather than a person to be respected. Janet's voice was horrified. They were planning to take your assets. They were planning to help me manage my assets, because apparently I'm too old and too stupid to do it myself. Martha, you're twisting everything, David said desperately. We were just trying to figure out how to make things work better. For everyone. Better for everyone? Or better for you? For the family. For all of us. Then why didn't you include me in the planning? Why didn't you ask me what I wanted? Why didn't you treat me like a member of this family instead of a burden to be managed? He had no answer for that. None of them did. I looked around the table at the faces of my family. Emma, horrified and hurt. Rose, furious on my behalf. Michael and Janet, uncomfortable witnesses to a family implosion. Lucas, staring at his plate like he wished he could disappear. And David and Karen, caught in their own web of manipulation and justification, I think. I said quietly, it's time for everyone to go home. Mom, wait. We can work this out. Can we? Because I'm not sure we can. I'm not sure we should. You're upset. You're not thinking clearly. The irony of that statement, that even now, even caught red-handed in their deception, they were still questioning my mental capacity, was almost funny. I'm thinking more clearly than I have in months, I said. I'm thinking clearly enough to know that this conversation is over. Emma stood up and hugged me tightly. I love you, Grandma. I'm sorry. You have nothing to be sorry for, sweetheart. Rose gathered her purse and coat, her movements sharp with anger. Martha, call me tomorrow. We need to talk. Michael and Janet made their awkward goodbyes, herding their confused children toward the door. The twins didn't understand why the party had ended so abruptly, why their aunt looked so sad, why everyone was whispering. Lucas disappeared upstairs without a word. David and Karen lingered in the dining room, surrounded by the debris of Emma's birthday party and their own exposed manipulations. "Mom," David said finally. "I know this looks bad." "It doesn't look bad, David. It is bad." "We can fix this." "Can we? Because I'm not sure trust is something you can fix once it's broken. You're our family. We love you. Do you? Because people who love me don't spy on my bank account. People who love me don't call me incompetent behind my back. People who love me don't plot to take control of my life. We weren't. Yes, you were. And the saddest part is, if you just talked to me, if you treated me like an adult member of this family instead of a confused child, I might have listened. I might have agreed to changes. I might have been willing to work together. You still could. I looked at my eldest son, the baby I'd rocked to sleep, the child I'd protected and provided for, the man who'd just spent an hour explaining to my family why I was too incompetent to manage my own life. "No," I said quietly. "I don't think I could." As the door closed behind them, I stood alone in my dining room, surrounded by birthday decorations and dirty dishes. The silence felt different now. Not empty, but full of possibility. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. The morning after Emma's birthday disaster, I called in sick to work for the first time in 2 years. Not because I was physically ill, but because I needed time to think, and more importantly, time to plan. I made coffee in the silent kitchen and sat at the table where 24 hours earlier, my family had dissected my competence like medical students examining a cadaver. The irony wasn't lost on me that they'd spent months studying my finances while remaining completely ignorant of my actual capabilities. David appeared in the doorway around 10, his hair disheveled and his eyes bloodshot. "Mom, we need to talk. Do we? About last night. Things got heated. Maybe we all said things we didn't mean." "I meant everything I said. Did you?" He slumped into the chair across from me, the same spot where Karen had spread out her manila folder of my supposed financial shortcomings. "I meant that I'm worried about you, that I want to help. By taking control of my bank accounts, by making sure you're protected. Mom, what happens if something happens to you? What happens to this house, to your savings, to everything you've worked for?" I studied his face, looking for traces of the little boy who used to climb into my lap when he had nightmares. He was still there, somewhere beneath the desperation and manipulation, but he was harder to find now. "David, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "What do you think I did before you were born? How do you think your father and I managed to buy this house, raise 2 children, and build a life together?" "That was different. Dad was working then." "Your father was unemployed for 18 months when you were 12. Do you remember that?" His face shifted, uncomfortable with the memory. Vaguely. "I remember it perfectly. I remember working double shifts at the diner while he looked for work. I remember stretching hamburger into 3 different meals, donning socks because we couldn't afford new ones, and somehow still managing to keep Christmas magical for you and Lucas. Mom, I know you've always been strong." "No, you don't know. Because if you knew, you wouldn't treat me like an invalid who can't be trusted with her own checkbook. That's not how we see you." "Then how do you see me?" He was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. When he looked up, his expression was almost vulnerable. "I see someone who's been carrying too much for too long. Someone who deserves to rest, to let other people take care of things for a while." "And you think the way to take care of me is to treat me like I'm incompetent?" "We never said you were incompetent. Karen did, last night, in front of the entire family." Karen was frustrated. She didn't mean it the way it sounded. How did she mean it? Look, Mom, you have to understand. We're all under a lot of stress. The job market is tough, money's tight, and we're all trying to figure out how to make this work. This? Living here, being a family, making ends meet. There it was, the truth he'd been dancing around. They weren't worried about my competence or my future. They were worried about their own security, their own comfort, their own financial stability. And the easiest solution was to convince me to hand over control of my resources. I see, I said quietly. Do you? Because we really do want what's best for you. What's best for me, or what's best for you. They're the same thing. We're family. I stood up from the table, rinsing my coffee cup in the sink while I processed his words. Family. Such a simple word that had become so complicated. David, I need some time to think about everything that's happened. Of course. Take all the time you need. But, Mom, don't let last night change everything between us. We can work through this. After he left for another day of job searching, I sat alone with my thoughts and a growing sense of clarity. They saw me as someone who needed protection, someone whose resources required management, someone whose decisions needed oversight. What they didn't see was someone who'd been quietly building her own safety net for years. I climbed the stairs to my bedroom and opened the closet door. Behind my winter coats, tucked into a shoebox that hadn't been disturbed in months, were documents that told a very different story about my financial situation. The first was a statement from an investment account I'd opened 5 years ago, shortly after my husband's death. While David and Karen had been monitoring my checking account, they'd missed the systematic transfers I'd been making to a separate savings account, and from there to a diversified portfolio that had grown steadily over time. The current balance was $127,000. The second document was a letter from my employer's Human Resources Department, confirming my eligibility for early retirement with full benefits. At 62, I could stop working tomorrow and receive 60% of my salary for the rest of my life, plus health insurance and a modest pension from my previous job. The third was a property assessment I'd commissioned quietly 6 months ago. The house David and Karen thought was barely breaking even was actually worth $340,000, with only $87,000 remaining on the mortgage. As I spread the papers across my bed, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Power. Not the power to control other people, but the power to control my own destiny. The power to make choices based on my own needs, rather than everyone else's expectations. My phone rang. Emma's name appeared on the screen. Hi, sweetheart. Grandma, are you okay? I couldn't sleep last night thinking about what happened. I'm fine, Emma. Better than fine, actually. Really. Because Dad and Mom are acting weird this morning, whispering and making phone calls. What kind of phone calls? I don't know, but I heard Dad mention something about lawyers and financial advisors. Grandma, they're not going to do something to hurt you, are they? The question hit me like ice water. Lawyers, financial advisors. How far were they planning to take this? Emma, I want you to know that whatever happens, you and I are going to be fine. Our relationship isn't going to change. What do you mean, whatever happens? I mean that sometimes adults have to make difficult decisions. Sometimes families have to have hard conversations about the future. You're scaring me. Don't be scared. Be proud. You're part of a family that raised a strong, capable woman who knows how to take care of herself. Are you talking about yourself? I'm talking about both of us. You're going to be just fine, Emma. and so am I. After I hung up, I made a list of phone calls I needed to make. First, my financial advisor, a woman named Patricia Chen, whom I'd been working with quietly for years. Second, my own lawyer. Not the family lawyer David and Karen probably had in mind, but someone who worked exclusively for me. Third, my sister Rose, who deserved to know what was really going on. Patricia answered on the second ring. "Martha, I was just thinking about you. How are you doing?" "I'm doing well, Patricia, but I need to ask you about something important." "Of course. What can I help you with?" If someone wanted to challenge my mental competency, to take control of my finances, what would that process look like? The silence on the other end of the line stretched long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. "Martha, is someone threatening to do that?" "I'm not sure. Maybe. I just want to understand what I might be facing. It would require a court proceeding. They'd need medical evidence of incapacity, usually from multiple doctors. They'd need to prove that you're unable to manage your own affairs. It's not easy to do, and it's not cheap." "What would be the best way to protect myself?" "Document everything. Medical records showing you're in good health, evidence of sound financial decisions, testimony from people who can attest to your mental acuity." "But Martha, why are you asking me this?" "Because I think my family is planning to have me declared incompetent so they can take control of my assets. That's a very serious accusation." "I know, and I hope I'm wrong. But I want to be prepared if I'm right." "Absolutely. Can you come in this week? I think we need to discuss some protective measures." "I'll be there tomorrow." My second call was to James Morrison, the lawyer who'd handled my husband's estate. He'd been recommended by Patricia, and I'd been quietly consulting with him for months about various legal matters. "Mrs. Hayes, good to hear from you. How can I help?" "James, I need to know about financial power of attorney. If someone were to try to get control of my accounts, what would stop them?" "Well, a durable power of attorney would need to be signed by you voluntarily. If you're not willing to sign one, they'd need to pursue guardianship through the courts. And if they tried, they'd need substantial evidence of incapacity, medical records, documentation of poor decision-making, testimony from credible witnesses. The courts don't take guardianship lightly. It removes fundamental rights from an individual. What if they had evidence of financial mismanagement?" "What kind of evidence?" I thought about Karen's notebook, her careful documentation of my spending patterns. Receipts showing what they consider excessive spending. Bank records showing a negative monthly cash flow. "Mrs. Hayes, are you in financial difficulty?" "No. But someone might try to make it look like I am." "I see. In that case, I'd recommend we document your actual financial situation very thoroughly. Bank statements, investment records, credit reports, anything that shows your true financial position." "I can do that." "Good. And Mrs. Hayes, if you're genuinely concerned about this, we should also discuss updating your will and establishing some additional legal protections." "What kind of protections?" "Trusts, healthcare directives, explicit instructions about who can and cannot make decisions on your behalf. The more documentation we have of your wishes while you're clearly competent, the harder it becomes for anyone to challenge those wishes later." My third call was to Rose, who answered before the first ring had finished. "Martha, I've been waiting for you to call. What the hell is going on with David and Karen?" "They think I'm incompetent to manage my own life." "That's ridiculous." "They've been monitoring my bank account, studying my finances, And apparently, discussing me with lawyers. What lawyers? I don't know yet. But Emma overheard them making phone calls this morning. Rose's voice was dangerously quiet. Are you telling me they're trying to have you declared incompetent? I think so. Over my dead body. Rose, I need you to know something. I'm not the helpless, old woman they think I am. Of course you're not. You're the strongest person. I know. No, I mean financially. I'm not struggling. I'm not incompetent. I've been building my own security for years. What do you mean? I told her about the investment account, the early retirement option, the house's real value. With each revelation, her silence grew more profound. Martha, why didn't you tell me about any of this? Because I didn't want anyone to know. I wanted to have something that was just mine, something that couldn't be touched or borrowed or used to solve someone else's problems. How much are we talking about? Enough to be completely independent. Enough to not need anyone's help or approval. Then why are you still supporting them? The question hung in the air like smoke, from a fire I couldn't put out. Why was I still supporting them? Why was I letting them treat me like a burden when I had the power to walk away at any time? Because they're my family, I said finally. And family treats each other with respect. Family doesn't plot to take away each other's rights. Family doesn't call each other incompetent behind their backs. I know. Do you? Because it sounds like you're still making excuses for them. She was right, and we both knew it. But knowing something and acting on it were two different things entirely. Rose, will you do something for me? Anything. Will you be my witness? If this goes to court, if they try to challenge my competency, will you testify that I'm mentally sound? Martha, I'll do more than testify. I'll hire my own lawyer to fight them if I have to. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just promise me something. What? Promise me you won't let them win. Promise me you won't let them take away your dignity just because it's easier than fighting. I promise. But as I hung up the phone, I realized I wasn't making a promise to Rose. I was making a promise to myself, a promise that had been building for months through every dismissive comment and every patronizing explanation and every secret meeting about my supposed incompetence. I wasn't going to let them win. I wasn't going to be the confused old woman they needed me to be to justify their actions. Instead, I was going to be exactly what I'd always been, a woman who knew how to take care of herself and the people she loved. The difference was that now I was going to stop pretending I needed their help to do it. The next morning I woke up at 5:30 a.m., not because an alarm forced me to, but because I had work to do. Real work. Not the kind that involved standing behind a jewelry counter for 8 hours, but the kind that involved reclaiming control of my own life. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table with my laptop, a notebook, and a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. The house was quiet. David and Karen were still asleep, and Lucas wouldn't surface until noon at the earliest. My first stop was online banking. Not the account they'd been monitoring, but the other accounts they didn't know existed. The investment portfolio Patricia managed for me. The high-yield savings account I'd been feeding systematically for 3 years. And the checking account I'd opened at a different bank specifically for my exit strategy. The numbers were even better than I'd remembered. While I'd been playing the role of the struggling single mother, carefully rationing grocery money and worrying about utility bills, my real net worth had been steadily climbing. The investments had performed well. The savings had grown through compound interest, and the house had appreciated significantly in value. I wasn't just financially secure. I was financially independent. The realization hit me with the force of a revelation. I didn't need David's job prospects, or Karen's financial advice, or Lucas's eventual contribution to the household. I didn't need any of them, at least not financially. So why was I still pretending that I did? Mom. David's voice from the doorway made me jump. I quickly minimized the browser window, but not before he'd seen me at the computer. Good morning, sweetheart. You're up early. Couldn't sleep. What are you doing? Just checking email. He moved closer and I caught a whiff of stale beer and anxiety sweat. We need to talk about yesterday. About everything. Do we? Mom, I know you're angry. I know we handled things badly. But we really are trying to help. I closed the laptop and gave him my full attention. Help me what? Plan for the future. Make sure you're protected. Protected from what? From being taken advantage of. From making mistakes that could cost you everything. The irony was so thick I could taste it. What kind of mistakes? Financial ones. People your age are vulnerable to scams, to bad investment advice, to family members who might not have your best interests at heart. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline, but he was completely serious. Family members who might not have my best interests at heart? It happens more than you think. Adult children who drain their parents' resources, who manipulate elderly relatives into signing over assets. That's terrible, I said quietly. Imagine having family members spy on your bank accounts, study your spending patterns, and plot to take control of your finances. His face flushed red. That's not what we're doing, isn't it? We're trying to protect you. From whom? From situations where you might not make the best decisions. Like what? Like supporting Lucas indefinitely while he figures out his life. Like paying for utilities you can't afford. Like being too generous with people who don't. Appreciate it. I stood up from the table, pouring myself another cup of coffee while I processed his words. In his mind, he was the responsible son protecting his naive mother from her own generosity. The fact that most of that generosity was directed toward him apparently didn't factor into his calculations. David, can I ask you something? Of course. What do you think would happen if I stopped supporting Lucas? He'd have to grow up, get a job, take responsibility for himself. And what would happen if I stopped paying for your car insurance? That's different. I'm actively looking for work. I need the car for job interviews. What would happen if I stopped covering the utilities? Mom, we've talked about this. Karen and I contribute to the household in other ways. What ways? Emotional support, helping with maintenance, being here for you, being here for me, or being here for the free room and board? That's not fair, isn't it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're worried about losing your safety net, not protecting mine. He was quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee cup like it might contain the answer to his problems. Maybe both, he said, finally. Maybe I'm worried about you and about us. It was the first honest thing he'd said in months, and I felt a flicker of hope for the boy I'd raised. I can work with honest, David. I can't work with manipulation. I know. I'm sorry about the bank account thing. That was wrong. It was wrong. But it's not the worst part. What's the worst part? The worst part is that you thought I was too stupid to notice. He winced. I never thought you were stupid. Then why did you do it? Because I was scared. Because I didn't know how to talk to you about money without sounding like I was asking for more help. So you decided to take it instead? I decided to understand the situation better before making suggestions. by violating my privacy, by gathering information. I sat back down across from him, studying his face. He looked younger when he was being honest, more like the child who used to come to me with scraped knees and hurt feelings. David, what if I told you that the situation isn't what you think it is? What do you mean? What if I told you that I'm not struggling financially? What if I told you that I could afford to support this household without any help from anyone? I'd say that's impossible. I've seen your pay stubs, your bank statements. The numbers don't add up. The numbers you've seen don't add up. What's that supposed to mean? I made a decision that would change everything, not the decision to tell him about my hidden assets. That could wait. But the decision to stop pretending to be the person he needed me to be. It means that maybe you don't know me as well as you think you do. Mom, you're scaring me. Good. Fear is appropriate when you've been taking advantage of someone, and you're not sure how long they're going to let you get away with it. That's not what we're doing. Then what are you doing? We're trying to be a family. Families don't lie to each other, David. Families don't spy on each other. Families don't meet in secret to discuss how incompetent each other are. We never said you were incompetent. Karen did. Last night. In front of everyone. Karen was frustrated. Karen was honest. For the first time since she's been living here, she said exactly what she really thinks of me. David's phone buzzed, and I saw Karen's name flash on the screen. He glanced at it but didn't answer. She wants to know how this conversation is going, I said. How did you... Because I know Karen. She's probably been awake since you got up waiting to hear whether you've convinced the incompetent old lady to see reason. Mom, please, don't do this. Don't do what? Don't let one bad evening destroy our family. I'm not destroying anything, David. I'm just finally seeing what was already there. He answered his phone on the third ring. Yeah, I'm talking to her now. I don't know. She's being difficult. Difficult? I was being difficult because I wouldn't pretend not to know what they'd been doing behind my back. Tell Karen, I said hi, I said loudly enough for her to hear through the phone. David moved toward the living room, lowering his voice, but I could still hear fragments of the conversation. She knows about the notebook. I don't know how. Maybe we should back off for a while. When he returned to the kitchen, his expression was carefully neutral. Karen thinks we should all sit down together and work this out. Does she? She wants to apologize for last night. She thinks maybe we can find a solution that works for everyone. What kind of solution? A family meeting. No accusations. No blame. Just honest conversation about how to move forward. I considered this. A family meeting where they'd undoubtedly try to convince me that their surveillance and secret planning had been motivated by love and concern. Where they'd suggest a compromise that somehow still ended with them having access to my financial information. Where they'd use words like transparency and cooperation to describe what was essentially a hostile takeover of my personal autonomy. Okay, I said. Okay. Let's have a family meeting. Tonight, 7 o'clock. Everyone who lives in this house. That's great, Mom. I think this is really going to help. I think so, too. He smiled for the first time in days, and I felt a pang of sadness for what we were about to lose. Not the relationship itself, that had been broken for months, but the illusion of the relationship, the pretense that we were still the same people we'd been before, desperation and manipulation, had poisoned everything between us. I'm going to run some errands today, I told him. I'll be back around 5. Errands? Banking, legal stuff. You know, the kinds of things incompetent people do. His smile faltered. "Mom, see you tonight, David." I gathered my purse and keys, leaving him standing in the kitchen with his phone and his second thoughts. But I wasn't thinking about David anymore. I was thinking about the appointment I'd made with Patricia Chen, the documents I needed to gather, and the conversation I was going to have with my family that evening. They wanted a family meeting. They were going to get one. But it wasn't going to be the meeting they were expecting. As I pulled out of the driveway, I saw the curtain in the front window move. Karen, watching to see which direction I was heading, probably trying to figure out what kind of errands would take me away from the house for most of the day. Let her wonder. Let them both wonder. After months of being studied like a lab specimen, it was time for them to be the ones who didn't know what was coming next. My first stop was the bank, where I transferred another $10,000 from my checking account to my private savings, money that David and Karen had been counting on, money they'd factored into their household budget calculations, money they'd assumed would always be available for their convenience. My second stop was Patricia's office, where I signed papers that would protect my assets from any future legal challenges. Trust documents, power of attorney forms that specifically excluded David and Karen, and explicit instructions about my wishes in case of emergency. My third stop was James Morrison's law office, where I updated my will and discussed the legal implications of what I was planning to do. "Are you sure about this, Mrs. Hayes?" he asked, reviewing the documents I'd brought. "Once you take these steps, there's no going back, I'm sure. Your family isn't going to be happy. My family hasn't been happy with me for months. The difference is that now I've stopped caring about their happiness more than my own dignity. I understand, but I want to make sure you understand the consequences. You're essentially cutting off financial support for your adult children. That's going to create conflict." "James, I've been avoiding conflict for so long that I forgot what it felt like to stand up for myself. I think a little conflict might be exactly what this family needs." By the time I returned home, the sun was setting, and my family was gathering in the living room for our meeting. David and Karen sat on the couch, Lucas in his usual chair, and Emma cross-legged on the floor. They all looked tense, expectant, like people waiting for a verdict. I took my usual seat in the armchair by the window and looked around at their faces. These people who had shared my home, eaten my food, spent my money, and planned my future without my input. "Thank you all for coming," I said. "I think it's time we had an honest conversation about our family." "That's exactly what we want," Karen said quickly. "Honesty, transparency, working together." "Good. Then let's start with the truth." I reached into my purse and pulled out a folder of documents. Bank statements, investment records, legal papers, everything that told the real story of my financial situation. The truth is that I've been lying to you, all of you, for months. David leaned forward. "Mom, what are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the fact that I'm not the struggling, incompetent woman you think I am. I'm talking about the fact that I don't need your help, your advice, or your protection." I spread the papers across the coffee table like cards in a poker game. "I'm talking about the fact that while you've been studying my grocery receipts and worrying about my financial competence, I've been building a portfolio worth more than most people make in 3 years." The silence in the room was absolute. Emma's eyes were wide with surprise. Lucas looked confused. David and Karen looked like they'd been slapped. "I'm talking about the fact that I could walk away from this house, this situation, and all of you tomorrow, and be perfectly fine." "Mom." David's voice was barely a whisper. "Why didn't you tell us?" "Because I wanted to see how far you'd go. I wanted to know what you really thought of me. I wanted to understand what kind of people you'd become when you thought I was helpless and dependent." I looked around the room at their shocked faces. "And now I know." The morning after our family meeting, I woke up to the sound of hushed, frantic voices downstairs. David and Karen were in the kitchen, their words carrying up through the flat heating vents, like smoke from a fire they couldn't put out. "How could we not know?" Karen's voice was sharp with panic. "How could she hide that much money? I don't know. I checked her account regularly. There was never more than a few $100s. Then where did it come from?" "I don't know, Karen. Maybe she's been lying about her salary. Maybe she inherited money she didn't tell us about. Or maybe she's been planning this for years." The word "this" hung in the air with ominous weight, as if my financial independence was some kind of attack on them rather than protection for myself. I dressed quietly and made my way downstairs, my footsteps deliberately audible on the wooden stairs. The kitchen went silent as I entered. "Good morning," I said, pouring myself coffee from the pot they'd made. "Morning," David mumbled, not meeting my eyes. Karen's smile was strained, artificial. "Martha, about last night. I think we all said things in the heat of the moment. Maybe we should sit down when everyone's had time to process." "I've had 3 years to process, Karen. I think that's enough time." 3 years? Since I started planning for the possibility that my family might not have my best interests at heart. David's head snapped up. "Planning what?" "My exit strategy." The words hit the kitchen like a physical blow. Karen's coffee cup rattled against her saucer. David's face went pale. "Exit strategy?" he repeated. "The plan for what I'd do if living with my family became untenable." "Mom, you can't be serious." "Why not?" "You've been planning my future without consulting me. Why shouldn't I plan my own future without consulting you?" Lucas wandered into the kitchen at that moment, his timing impeccable as always. He surveyed the tense scene and headed straight for the coffee pot. "What's everyone so serious about this morning?" "Your mother is threatening to abandon her family," Karen said, her voice tight with anger. "I'm not threatening anything. I'm simply pointing out that I have options." Lucas frowned, still not fully awake. "What kind of options?" "The kind where I don't have to live with people who think I'm incompetent." "Nobody thinks you're incompetent." "Mom, really? Because yesterday Karen told a room full of people that I was too stupid to manage my own money. David has been monitoring my bank account for weeks like I'm a confused teenager. And you, Lucas, have been treating me like a personal ATM for the better part of a year." Lucas had the grace to look ashamed. "I never meant—" "I know what you meant. You meant to take advantage of someone you thought had no choice but to give you money. That's not fair, isn't it? When's the last time you asked if I could afford to lend you money? When's the last time you actually paid me back? When's the last time you treated me like a person instead of a resource?" He opened his mouth to answer, then closed it again. We all knew the answer. My phone rang, interrupting the uncomfortable silence. Rose's name appeared on the screen. "Excuse me," I said, stepping into the living room to answer. "How did it go last night?" Rose asked without preamble. "About as well as you'd expect. They're in damage control mode this morning." "Are you okay?" "I'm better than okay. I'm free." Free. Free to stop pretending. Free to stop making excuses for them. Free to make decisions based on what's best for me, instead of what's easiest for everyone else. What are you going to do? I'm going to give them exactly what they've been asking for. Which is? Independence. They want to be independent adults who make their own financial decisions. Perfect. They can start today. When I returned to the kitchen, the three of them were huddled together in what was obviously a strategy session. They broke apart as I entered, but not quickly enough to hide the guilty expressions. "Making plans?" I asked. "We were just talking about how to move forward," David said carefully. "Good. I've been thinking about that too." I sat down at the table and folded my hands in front of me, the picture of maternal calm. "I've decided to accept your help with the household finances." They exchanged confused glances. This was clearly not what they'd expected. "You have?" Karen asked suspiciously. "Absolutely. You're right that I've been carrying too much of the financial burden. It's time for everyone to contribute their fair share." That's great, Mom," David said, though his voice suggested he sensed a trap. "So starting Monday, everyone who lives in this house will be responsible for their own expenses." "What do you mean?" "I mean Lucas will pay his own car insurance, phone bill, and grocery budget. David and Karen will cover their own expenses plus a third of the utilities. Everyone will contribute equally to household supplies and maintenance." "A third?" Karen's voice was faint. "You, me, and Lucas. 3 equal shares." "But what about Emma when she's here? What about shared expenses like internet and cable?" "Emma doesn't live here full-time, so she doesn't pay rent. As for internet and cable, you can split those costs between yourselves or cancel the services. Your choice." David was doing math in his head, his expression growing more alarmed by the second. "Mom, we can't afford." "Then you'll need to find ways to afford it. Get jobs, reduce expenses, move somewhere cheaper. You know, the kinds of things independent adults do." "But we're family," Karen protested. "Families help each other." "You're absolutely right. Families do help each other. But help goes both ways, and respect is non-negotiable." Lucas cleared his throat. "Mom, I understand what you're saying, but I'm still looking for work. I can't just—" "You've been looking for work for 8 months, Lucas. At some point, looking becomes an excuse instead of an effort. The job market is tough. The job market is tough for everyone, but somehow, millions of people manage to find work anyway." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you have 2 weeks to find a job, any job, or find somewhere else to live." The kitchen went dead silent. Even the refrigerator seemed to stop humming. "You're kicking us out?" David's voice was strangled. "I'm giving you the independence you've been wanting, the freedom to make your own financial decisions without interference from someone you consider incompetent." "We never said we wanted to leave." "You said you wanted to manage your own finances. You said I was too controlling, too old-fashioned, too incompetent to make good decisions. This is your chance to prove how much better you can do on your own." Karen's hands were shaking as she set down her coffee cup. "Martha, you can't do this. We have nowhere to go." "You have jobs. You have skills. You have the financial planning expertise you've been so eager to share with me. I'm sure you'll figure something out." "We don't have jobs," David said desperately. "Not real ones. Not ones that pay enough for rent and utilities and everything else." "Then get real ones." "It's not that simple." "It's exactly that simple. You just don't want to do it because it's easier to live off someone else's work." "We contribute to this household." "How?" "Emotional support, maintenance, company." "David, I can pay for a handyman. I can hire a housekeeper. I can adopt a dog if I want company. What I can't do is buy respect from people who see me as a burden." The silence stretched on until Lucas finally broke it, his voice small and defeated. "Mom, we can't afford to live anywhere else." "Then you'll have to find a way to afford it." "But we're your children," Karen said, her voice rising with desperation. "You can't just throw us out on the street." "I'm not throwing you anywhere. I'm offering you the same thing you've been demanding from me. The right to make your own choices and live with the consequences." David slumped in his chair, the fight going out of him all at once. "How long have you been planning this?" "Since the day I realized that love without respect isn't love at all. It's exploitation. That's not fair." "Fair?" The word came out sharper than I'd intended. "Let me tell you about fair, David. Fair would have been asking my opinion before you decided to manage my finances. Fair would have been treating me like a competent adult instead of a burden to be managed. Fair would have been Lucas getting a job before he accumulated 8 months of debt to me." I stood up and walked to the kitchen counter where I kept my important papers. From the drawer, I pulled out a folder I'd been preparing for weeks. "Since we're talking about fairness, let's talk about secrets." I set the folder on the table and opened it. The first document was a bank statement, but not one they'd ever seen before. "This is my retirement account, the one you don't know about." David leaned forward, his eyes widening as he saw the balance. That's over $200,000. $237,000. To be exact." Karen's mouth fell open. "Where did that money come from?" "From 40 years of working 2 jobs, putting myself through night school, and living below my means so I could help my family when they needed it." I pulled out the next document. "This is the deed to the house, in my name only, paid off 6 years ago." "We know that," Lucas said weakly. "Do you? Do you know that this house is worth $450,000? Do you know that I could sell it tomorrow and move to Florida, where I could live comfortably for the rest of my life?" They exchanged panicked glances. The math was becoming clear to them. "Here's what else you don't know." I spread more papers across the table. "I own rental property in 3 states. I have investments that have been growing steadily for 20 years. I have a pension from the factory that's more than enough to support me." David's face had gone gray. "Why didn't you tell us?" "Because I wanted to help my family. Because I thought that if I could ease your financial burdens, you'd have more time and energy to appreciate the things that really matter." "We do appreciate." "No, you don't. You appreciate my money. You appreciate my services. You appreciate my willingness to absorb your problems. But you don't appreciate me." I pulled out the last document, the one I'd been saving. "This is your father's life insurance policy. The one you've all been assuming I used up years ago." Karen reached for it with shaking hands. "The whole $500,000? Every penny. Invested carefully. Grown substantially. Your father wanted to make sure his family was taken care of, and I made sure his wishes were honored." "Then why have you been working so hard? Why have you been living like you're poor?" "Because I wanted to teach you the value of money. I wanted you to learn independence and self-respect. I wanted you to become adults who could stand on their own feet." Lucas was staring at the papers like they were written in a foreign language. "You mean you've been rich this whole time?" "I've been financially secure. There's a difference. But you let us think. I let you think what you chose to think. I never lied about my situation. I simply didn't advertise my assets." David's voice was barely above a whisper. Why are you telling us this now? Because I want you to understand what you're giving up. I want you to know that when you choose disrespect over gratitude, you're not just hurting my feelings. You're walking away from someone who has the resources to genuinely help you build better lives. I began gathering the papers back into the folder. But more importantly, I want you to understand that I don't need you. I've been supporting this family out of love, not necessity. And love without respect is a gift that eventually stops giving. Karen was crying now, tears streaming down her face. Martha, we never meant... Yes, you did. You meant every dismissive comment, every eye roll, every decision made without consulting me. You meant to treat me like I was too stupid to manage my own life while you benefited from the results of my competence. What do you want from us? David asked, his voice hollow. I want what I've always wanted. Respect, honesty, genuine appreciation instead of entitled demands. And if we give you that, then we can talk about rebuilding our relationship. But first, you have to prove that you can survive without taking advantage of me. I closed the folder and tucked it under my arm. The 2-week deadline stands. Find jobs, find housing, or find a way to contribute meaningfully to this household. But the days of treating me like a piggy bank are over. As I headed toward the stairs, Lucas called after me. Mom, wait. What about Emma? She's in college. She needs help with tuition. I turned back, and for the first time that morning, I smiled. Emma has never asked me for money she didn't need. She's never taken my help for granted. Emma calls me to see how I'm doing, not just when she needs something. Emma will continue to receive every bit of support I can give her. That's not fair, Karen protested. She's just the granddaughter. She's the only member of this family who treats me like family. 2 days later, Emma arrived home from college for her planned weekend visit. She found me in the garden, tending to the roses that had always been my refuge during difficult times. Grandma Martha, she said, settling beside me on the garden bench. Dad called me. He said some pretty intense stuff happened here. I'm sure he did. He said you're kicking everyone out. I set down my pruning shears and looked at my granddaughter. Really looked at her. At 19, Emma had her grandfather's steady brown eyes and her own mother's gentle nature. But there was something else there, a wisdom that seemed older than her years. What do you think about that? I think it's about time. Her words surprised me. Really? Grandma. I've been watching this family for my whole life. I've seen how they treat you. I've seen Dad make financial decisions for you like you're a child. I've seen Uncle Lucas borrow money he never pays back. I've watched Mom roll her eyes every time you express an opinion. You never said anything. I didn't think it was my place, but when Dad called ranting about how ungrateful and unreasonable you were being, I realized someone needed to speak up. What did you tell him? Emma smiled, and in that smile I saw an echo of the strength I'd been trying to find in myself. I told him that maybe if he'd treated you with respect, he wouldn't be facing eviction from his own mother. You didn't. I did. And then I told him that if he wanted my help convincing you to change your mind, he was talking to the wrong person. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, surrounded by the roses that had weathered countless storms in this garden. Are you really going through with it? Emma asked. The deadline is tomorrow. So far, Lucas has had 2 job interviews, but no offers. David and Karen have been making calls, but they're looking for positions that match their previous salaries, not their current situation. What about you? Are you okay with all this? It was a question no one else had thought to ask. I'm terrified, I admitted. These people have been my whole world for so long. Even when they frustrated me, even when they hurt me, they were my purpose. And now? Now I have to figure out who I am when I'm not being taken advantage of. Emma reached over and took my hand. Can I tell you something? You've always been my hero. Emma. No, let me finish. Growing up, I watched you work multiple jobs to keep this family afloat. I watched you go without things you wanted so other people could have things they needed. I watched you make everyone else's problems your responsibility. That's what mothers do. That's what martyrs do. Mothers teach their children to be independent and responsible. You've been enabling everyone to avoid growing up. Her words stung because they were true. I thought I was helping. You were helping. But you were also hurting yourself and preventing them from becoming the adults they needed to be. So, you think I'm doing the right thing? I think you're doing the necessary thing. There's a difference. That evening, I called a family meeting. Everyone gathered in the living room. David and Karen on the couch, Lucas in the armchair, Emma cross-legged on the floor beside my chair. The atmosphere was tense, expectant. Tomorrow is the deadline I set, I began. I wanted to give everyone a chance to share where things stand. David cleared his throat. Mom, we've been talking, and we want to apologize. We realize we may have taken you for granted. May have. We did take you for granted. Karen corrected quickly. We're sorry. We want to make things right. How? We're willing to contribute more to household expenses, David said. We can pay 1/3 of the utilities like you suggested. And the rest of your expenses? We're still working on that part. I looked at Lucas. What about you? I have another interview on Monday. The job doesn't pay much, but it's something. What kind of job? His cheeks reddened. Retail, at the electronics store in the mall. That's honest work. It doesn't pay enough to cover my expenses and move out. Then you'll need to find additional work or reduce your expenses. Mom, David leaned forward. We understand that you want us to be more independent. We get that. But you have to understand that we can't just completely restructure our lives in 2 weeks. Why not? Because it's not realistic. Because we've built our lives around certain assumptions about our living situation. You mean, you've built your lives around the assumption that I would always be available to subsidize your choices. That's not... He stopped himself. Okay, yes. Maybe we did assume that. Then it's time to build new assumptions. Emma spoke up from her, spot on the floor. Can I say something? Everyone looked at her, surprised. Emma rarely inserted herself into family discussions. I think you're all missing the point, she said quietly. This isn't really about money or living arrangements. It's about respect. Emma, this doesn't concern you, Karen said sharply. It concerns all of us. Grandma Martha is the heart of this family. She's the one who remembers everyone's birthdays, who shows up when someone's sick, who listens when someone needs to talk. But when do any of you listen to her? We listen. No, you don't. You hear her when she's offering to help, but you tune out when she's expressing her own needs or opinions. David's face flushed. That's not true. Really? When's the last time you asked Grandma how she's doing and actually waited for an answer? When's the last time you considered her feelings before making a decision that affected her? The room fell silent. Emma looked around at each of them. She's been carrying this family for decades, and instead of gratitude, you've given her condescension. Instead of respect, You've given her management, and instead of love, you've given her the burden of solving everyone's problems while pretending she's not capable of handling her own. "Emma, that's enough," David said firmly. "No, it's not." Her voice was steady, but I could see the emotion in her eyes. "Grandma Martha deserves better from all of you. She deserves to be treated like the intelligent, capable, generous woman she is, instead of like an ATM with opinions." Karen was crying again. "We love her. We do." "Then show her. Not with words, but with actions. Not with promises, but with respect." Emma stood up and kissed my forehead. "I have studying to do, but Grandma, I want you to know that whatever you decide, I support you. You've earned the right to live your life on your own terms." After she left, the room remained quiet for several minutes. Finally, Lucas spoke. "She's right, isn't she?" "About what?" David asked. "About all of it. About the way we've been treating Mom. About the assumptions we've made." David rubbed his face with his hands. "Maybe. Probably. So what do we do now?" I had been listening to their exchange, but now I leaned forward. "Now you prove that Emma's faith in this family isn't misplaced." "How?" "By showing me that you can respect my decisions even when they're inconvenient for you. By demonstrating that you value our relationship enough to rebuild it on a foundation of mutual respect instead of dependence." "And if we can do that? Then we figure out how to move forward as a family of adults instead of a collection of people taking advantage of one person's generosity." David looked at Karen, then at Lucas, then back at me. "What exactly are you asking of us?" "I'm asking you to prove that you can take care of yourselves. Get jobs. Any jobs that provide honest income. Find your own living arrangements, even if they're not ideal. Learn to budget and sacrifice and make hard choices. Show me that you're adults I can respect, not children I need to rescue. And then we can talk about what a healthy family relationship looks like between financially independent adults." Karen wiped her eyes. "How long do we have to prove ourselves?" "As long as it takes. What if we can't do it? What if we fail?" "Then you'll have learned something important about yourselves. And I'll have learned something important about what I mean to this family." Lucas stood up abruptly. "I'm going to make some phone calls. There are jobs I turned down because they weren't good enough. Maybe it's time to reconsider what good enough means." After he left, David and Karen remained on the couch, holding hands and staring at the floor. "Mom," David said finally, "I owe you an apology that goes back years." "I'm listening." "I thought I was protecting you. I thought I was helping by taking over your finances, by making decisions for you. But I was really trying to control you, because it made me feel more secure about my own situation. Go on. Duh, I've been living in your house, benefiting from your generosity, and somehow convincing myself that I was the one doing you a favor. That's not just wrong. It's delusional." Karen nodded tearfully. "I've been so focused on what I thought. You should be doing that I never stopped to appreciate what you were already doing. What are you going to do about it?" "Whatever it takes," David said. "We'll find jobs, find a place to live, learn to stand on our own feet. And maybe, if we do it right, we'll earn back the privilege of being your family." As they left the room, I remained in my chair, feeling lighter than I had in years. The hard conversations weren't over, and the real work was just beginning. But for the first time in a long time, I had hope that my family might learn to see me as I truly was. Not a resource to be managed, but a person to be respected. 3 months later, I was sitting in the same garden where Emma and I had talked. But everything else had changed. Lucas had taken the retail job and added a weekend position at a coffee shop. He'd moved into a small apartment with 2 roommates. Not glamorous, but clean and affordable. More importantly, he'd paid me back $200 of what he owed me, with a promise to continue monthly payments until the debt was cleared. David and Karen had found work. David at a smaller firm for less money than he'd made before. Karen as a part-time bookkeeper for a local business. They'd rented a modest 2-bedroom apartment across town and were learning to live within their means. David still called regularly, but now he asked about my life instead of just reporting on his problems. The house felt different without them. Quieter, certainly, but also more peaceful. For the first time in years, I could leave food in the refrigerator and find it there the next day. I could watch my own television programs without negotiating. I could make decisions about my day without considering anyone else's schedule. It was liberating and lonely in equal measure. Emma had become my most frequent visitor, stopping by at least twice a week to check on me and share stories from college. She'd also become something of a family diplomat, keeping me updated on her father and uncle's progress, and occasionally facilitating conversations when tensions still ran high. "How are you doing, really?" she asked during one of our garden sessions. "Better than I expected," I told her honestly. "I thought I'd feel guilty or empty without everyone here to take care of." "Oh, but you don't?" "I feel useful in a different way. I'm volunteering at the literacy center downtown. I'm taking a pottery class. I'm reading books I've been meaning to read for years. What about family dinners and holidays?" That was the delicate question we'd all been navigating. "We're figuring it out as we go." Last Sunday, David and Karen came over for dinner. They brought groceries and insisted on cooking. It was nice. "And Uncle Lucas? He's coming for dinner next weekend. He asked if he could bring his roommates. Apparently, they're curious about the woman who straightened him out, as he puts it." Emma laughed. "I'd like to meet them too." "You're welcome any time. You know that." "I know. But I also know that you're building a new life for yourself, and I don't want to assume I have a place in it just because I supported you." I looked at my granddaughter, this wise, thoughtful young woman who had somehow grown up to be everything I'd hoped my own children would become. "Emma, you have a place in my life because you've earned it, not through family obligation or emotional manipulation, but through genuine care and respect. You're not here because you need something from me. You're here because you enjoy my company, and I enjoy yours." "Is that what you want from Dad and Uncle Lucas?" "It's what I want from everyone. Relationships based on choice rather than obligation, on mutual respect rather than financial dependence. Do you think they're learning that?" I considered the question carefully. "David is. He's starting to understand the difference between helping and controlling. Karen is making an effort, though I think she's still adjusting to seeing me as a person rather than a problem to be solved." "And Uncle Lucas?" "Lucas is discovering that he's more capable than he thought. The work is hard, and the money is tight. But he told me last week that he feels better about himself than he has in years. Because he's earning his own way? Because he's proving to himself that he can. Self-respect is something you can't give someone else. They have to build it themselves." Emma was quiet for a moment, pulling weeds from around the base of the rose bushes. "Can I ask you something personal?" "Of course. Do you ever regret what you did? Setting the ultimatum, forcing everyone out?" I'd been asking myself the same question for months. "I regret that it was necessary, I regret that our relationships had deteriorated to the point where such drastic action was the only way to create change, but not the action itself? No, not the action itself. I spent too many years sacrificing my own dignity for the sake of family peace. I was so afraid of being alone that I accepted being disrespected. That wasn't fair to me. And ultimately, it wasn't fair to them either. What do you mean? By allowing them to take advantage of me, I was enabling them to become people they wouldn't be proud of. David is a better man when he's not playing financial puppet master with his mother's life. Lucas is discovering strengths he never knew he had when he's not taking the easy way out. And Karen is learning that being part of a family means contributing to it, not just benefiting from it. Emma smiled. You know what I think? What? I think you did the bravest thing possible. You chose self-respect over family peace. That takes incredible courage. It didn't feel brave at the time. It felt terrifying. The best kind of courage usually does. That evening, after Emma had gone back to campus, I sat in my living room with a cup of tea and reflected on the journey that had brought me to this point. The house was quiet, but it was a comfortable quiet now. The silence of peace rather than the silence of resentment. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. David's name appeared on the screen. Hi, Mom. I hope I'm not calling too late. Not at all. How are you? Good. Tired, but good. Karen got promoted to full-time at the bookkeeping firm, so we're finally able to put a little money away each month. That's wonderful. Mom, I called because I wanted to ask you something. What's that? Would you like to come to dinner at our place this weekend? Nothing fancy, just the three of us. I thought maybe it's time I cooked for you for a change. The invitation surprised me. In all the years David had lived in my house, he'd never once offered to cook dinner for the family. I'd like that very much. Really? Really? What time should I be there? Is 6 o'clock okay? And Mom? Thank you. For what? For not giving up on us. For believing we could be better than we were. After we hung up, I sat holding the phone and feeling something I hadn't experienced in years. Anticipation for time with my family that wasn't built around obligation or crisis. 6 months ago, I had been invisible. A resource to be managed rather than a person to be respected. Today, I was building relationships based on choice and mutual appreciation. The transformation hadn't been easy, and it wasn't complete, but it was real. I thought about the woman I'd been, always giving, always accommodating, always putting everyone else's needs before my own dignity. She had been generous and loving, but she had also been afraid of being alone, afraid of conflict, afraid of demanding the respect she deserved. The woman I was becoming was still generous and loving, but she was no longer afraid. She understood that love without respect is not sustainable, that family relationships must be chosen rather than endured, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable behavior that diminishes everyone involved. My phone buzzed with a text message from Lucas. Got the promotion at the coffee shop. Manager position starts next month. Want to celebrate with dinner this week? I smiled as I typed back, Congratulations. I'm proud of you. Yes to dinner. You pick the place. His response came immediately. Actually, can I cook for you at your place? I've been learning, and I want to show off a little. As I settled into bed that night, I reflected on the unexpected gifts that had emerged from the wreckage of our old family dynamic. David was learning to be a son rather than a manager. Lucas was discovering his own capabilities. Karen was finding her place in a family that operated on respect rather than hierarchy. And I was learning that the love I'd been so afraid of losing had actually grown stronger when it was no longer taken for granted. The story of my family's transformation wasn't finished. Healthy relationships require ongoing effort and attention. But for the first time in years, I was confident that we were building something sustainable. Something based on choice rather than obligation, on respect rather than dependence, on genuine appreciation rather than entitled assumption. I had given my family everything I had: my youth, my savings, my energy, my devotion. But the greatest gift I'd given them was the opportunity to earn back my respect, and in doing so, to discover their own dignity. Sometimes love means holding on. Sometimes it means letting go. And sometimes it means having the courage to demand that the people you love become worthy of your love. In the end, that courage had saved us all.